Welcome to the Tailwind Marketing Podcast, where we talk to IT marketing leaders about how to drive more sales. Hosted by Carlos Corredor, founder of Condor, an Inc. 5000 company and one of the fastest growing IT marketing agencies in the US.
3, 2, 1, 0.
This episode is brought to you by Condor, a digital marketing agency for mid-market IT companies. Most IT marketing teams struggle to drive sales, overwhelmed by long sales cycles and an elusive audience. Condor helps you measure and generate qualified pipeline, make the most with your budget, and finally get executive recognition. You can learn more at condoragency.com. And today, we welcome Josh Shulman. He's the head of B2B marketing at Innovecs, a global digital transformation tech company. They've made the Inc. 5000 list 5 years in a row. They have a team of over 600 people, and Josh has been leading that growth with a particular focus on content and ABM, which are some of the topics that we'll discuss today. So welcome, Josh, and why don't you tell us a little bit more about you and your background?
Hey, thanks for having me, Carlos. I'm glad to be here. My background, very diverse, but always in the field of marketing, I would say. So I came up doing essentially ad management at a B2B ad tech SaaS company where I kind of learned a lot about target audiences, this kind of information, and how to communicate with prospects, getting the messaging out. Did my master's degree also in marketing, then switched over to B2B video tech. So that was a whole different monster, but at least it was within the framework of B2B SaaS, very product-based, direct focus. And in the past 2 years, I've been working with Innovecs, which is a services provider. And it's been a completely different narrative. So bringing forward and modernizing the marketing tactics and strategy in this ecosystem has been an incredible adventure to date, because realistically, I think some of these services or organizations operate as marketing functions did 10 years ago, with a high focus on pure email outbound, old school methodologies like just buy a banner, put $500 behind it and see how it goes. So I came on board and wanted to modernize. How do we do things? How did the SaaS business and SaaS ecosystem apply their marketing methodologies? And then how can we modernize our ecosystem? Thankfully, I've been beneficial enough to work and communicate with some of my colleagues who are in the similar space, competitive organizations. But marketing is we all help each other out and we can all just grow together. There's a big enough pool of target audiences and knowledge education that's always a huge benefit to anyone and everyone.
Yeah, and I hear what you're saying about 10 years ago. Most companies still operate, I think, like that. Not exactly like that, but let's say that they've been slower to progress than one would think, right? Or at least that was my perception, at least when I was, let's say, on the client side. Now that I'm on the, let's say, or on the agency side, now that I'm on the client side, because, say a marketing agency, it's obviously a B2B company, and we also have to do ABM for ourselves. You start feeling a little more empathy, because it's intimidating, or it can be intimidating. It's completely different than traditional advertising and what we feel comfortable with. So I think at least now most companies are trying to, but there's also ABM, I think, has become also such a buzzword that it's like sometimes they think they're doing ABM, but not really, So in your opinion, let's start with what's your definition, or what would you explain of what is ABM done right?
I think the core theory behind ABM is a great model for any and every business to follow outside of consumer goods. Because the context is you have to go in and really understand your target audience, get aligned with their pain points, and focus on really well-aligned communications that show that you understand what your prospects' pain points are and that you can offer a solution there. So what it's done right is change the mindset of how realistically marketers think. Because if you break down what is ABM and look at it from the functional perspective, it's what a lot of salespeople had been doing for ages. Like really going down, customizing who they're speaking with and why. It's been the adoption and the rollout of technology that's taken that step back. You've had social media across Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, all of these tool sets that made it so much easier to reach your target audience at a massive scale, that you ended up having these two different segmentations of how do you address your target audience. And it worked for a long time because you were able to get in front of your target buyer, your target audience realistically, because not everyone's a buyer and we know this now, and just get your message in front of them. And it worked because people are like, oh, wow, how did this person find me? How did they reach me? It's so pertinent. And it just got oversaturated. And now with the adoption, even with the adoption of AI and so many customization techniques, it's scaled out to the point where customization isn't as important, more so sounding human. But you asked, what has ABM done right? I think ABM has positively changed the mindset of marketers to once again think through the lens of their target audience, as opposed to just going out there, flipping a few switches on your ad buying, working with marketing agencies or what have you, just to getting a message out there and hoping something returns. Now you have to do it with the right intention.
Yeah, it's interesting that you focus the concept of ABM done right around the messaging more so than anything technical, you know? I would think that, yeah, perhaps ABM done right is saying, okay, no, you have to use a platform, a sales intelligence platform, and be subscribed to one. You have to have at least a minimum of X amount of companies. You have to do retargeting via LinkedIn and X, Y, and Z, you know, and you need to be generating X amount of content pieces each month. And in reality, you can do all that and still do ABM wrong if, from what I'm understanding, if you're being too salesy or talking about yourself as opposed to understanding what the problem of the other side is, which I think I completely agree that that's really the shift in paradigm compared to how the old sales folks are used to doing things, right? Because they, as you mentioned, you know, the people were out there with those problems and the sales people also were there calling them, but it was more of a one directional approach, you know, versus here it's more like you have to put yourself in the shoes of your target audience, and then, you know, because otherwise you have no chance, you know, with the amount of messages that are out there. And is that a fair, let's say, interpretation of the way you described it?
Yeah, because tool sets are tool sets. It's the power of your tool set is controlled by the strength of the wielder. So you can have the most comprehensive, well thought out ABM focused tool, but if you don't have your baseline and your basics set up first, then this ABM tool just ends up being any other media buying tool. Demand base, Rollworks, Enrich, I haven't used that one, but all of these tools, which are supposed to be some of the best in class, best in market, if you are not applying the right methodology to leveraging them, then you're just going to be using them as your basic media buying toolkit, and it's going to fail miserably. And with the exception of a few, most of these ABM tool sets focus entirely on just capturing as much as the market as they can without first educating the people, hey, set your baseline first. So to me, I would always say, if you're launching an ABM strategy, an ABM thought process, take the manual approach first. Build an Excel sheet of your target audience based on the key parameters that a lot of these tool sets will have you input. And honestly, you could find all of these same input parameters going on LinkedIn native, Meta native, all of these media buying locations. You could understand the parameters that they're looking for and do that manually first, because then you're going to understand what works, what doesn't work, what kind of things you should be putting out there. And of course, you made a great point there. I am talking a lot about messaging, because you can find the right target audience based on all of these parameters across ABM tool sets, social media tool sets, what have you. But if you're sending them the wrong stuff, you're going to have a terrible conversion. So that baseline of first understanding your target audience also has to be transferred to what kind of content you're putting into it to reach them. And if at this point you're just putting a banner, hey, I'm a banner together that says, hey, I'm here, look at me, look what I can do, it's not going to work. You can, what I find, and I've seen it time and time again, is every single organization, every single person who wants to get into this methodology always says, oh, but let's experiment with it first. It's like, you have people who tell you, I know it's going to fail because I've done this for 5 years. You have so much research out there, so many of these social media experts, subject matter experts, not social media experts, who are out there regularly talking about what's the correct way to run these processes. And still it's like, no, I want to experience it first. All right, fine.
Go ahead and
But
waste $1 million.
yeah, just take the time. From my experience, we've at least taken the approach of test that approach to set the baseline, because in our industry, we were targeting quite a variety of different audiences. So our core practices right now are supply chain and gaming. But when I joined, we also had high tech, health tech, fintech. You could name the media tech, ad tech. You could go on forever. But these are all different target audiences. They might need similar solutions, but they need different messaging. So experimenting and setting the baseline for these two core focus areas, that's where we got to experiment and learn a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. So when you're talking to come up or define your baseline, and the examples that you're giving, it sounds like it's less of a laboratory exercise and more of a go out there and, try some messaging, see what sticks, see what the audience is finding valuable, right? It's more like testing in the street than in the lab. Is that a fair? Because for example, we did it differently, right? We thought that by putting our heads together, our leadership team, and truly understanding. Obviously, we have to talk to our clients, but it was more of a to be honest, it was more of a laboratory exercise than the street exercise. But you're saying that you think it should be more experimental than theoretical.
I think it depends on the context, who you have internally, what kind of knowledge you have. My team of marketers, we are for the most part, I would say marketing generalists in terms of our various experiences of target audiences. Like we have guys who worked for Coca-Cola, for Red Bull, so B2C brands. We had folks working in high tech, in SaaS. I come from video tech and ad tech. So it's this hodgepodge of information. We don't have the marketing internal expertise to say we know this works for supply chain. Similarly, so we don't have the expertise to say, hey, we know this works in gaming. So Innovecs had and still has a wealth of knowledge and expertise within these segments, but it's similarly variable. Like you might have some technical people who have a lot of knowledge about the gaming sphere, but not necessarily how to actually address the target audience. On the supply chain side, we have incredible knowledge on the sales side, people who came from the supply chain industry, but they came from a specific product base in the supply chain. So they came from the likes of Blue Yonder, Manhattan Associates. They already had that specific niche down. When you come up at the services level and you're looking at these industries, which are massive, they're absolutely massive, getting that messaging down just at the get-go, we would have absolutely loved to have that experiences of like testing as if you're in a lab. But given the disparity of internal knowledge and, let's be realistic, budget, as is every marketer's pain point, we had to get creative. And the way you get creative is, take it to the proverbial streets.
No, I hear you. And do you have any advice on how to set that baseline, or crucial things or common mistakes that people make when defining not only the target audience, but identifying their problems and the main messaging to attack and generate interest in that target audience? Any practical advice there?
I think there's the stigma that when you are going to market, you have to sound like an expert. And the result is, if you're not an expert and you go into the market talking the talk, but you can't walk the walk, you're going to get called out by your target audience. Like, what the heck are you talking about? This isn't actually pertinent. So my advice would be, don't be afraid to admit that you're new and to run your testing from the perspective of, hey, we're new to this space. We'd love to learn more. Are you willing to chat about it? So that's one of the key campaigns that we're running right now on the supply chain side, where we have our team, our social media folks, our copywriters, our distribution team as a whole. They're reaching out to our target audience with the initial outreach point being, hey, we're launching something. We're relatively new to this. We'd love to get your insights. And then creating a conversation around that and putting an idea of control in the prospect's hands. Because as you may know, as a podcast interviewer, the control is in your hands based on the type of questions that you ask.
Mm-hmm.
So the respondent has the capability to drive the conversation from their responses, but then you can drive that back in the direction you want based on the level of questions. So I don't want to say it's feigning being dumb, but it's acknowledging a lack of knowledge can take you much further than pretending you have too much.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
I find that really interesting. I think it's brilliant because it shows vulnerability. And when you want to create trust, I think vulnerability goes a long way, right? It's however, my challenge is, if I were to apply that myself, is okay, you created trust from a human perspective because you're being honest, you are being vulnerable and asking for help, right? And I can definitely see how the response to that is going to be positive and much greater than if you go out and just putting your thought leadership advice out there, right? However, your objective has to be to gain that knowledge, right? Because if your objective is to sell to that person, you might be in a tough spot after you have those initial conversations and say, okay, we'll do this for you. The person is going to know, well, I mean, you haven't done this before, right? I help you with that knowledge. Like, how you would you handle that, or is that not a problem because you're truly looking for knowledge gaining at that point?
It's a mix of both, and it goes back to setting that baseline. So before you're even going out and starting this type of communication framework, it's imperative to work with sales and whatever level of expertise you do have in-house to say, okay, what is the absolute minimum set of knowledge that I need to have to sound like, yes, maybe you're new in the industry, but it's not like you're coming in completely unknowledgeable. So you have that trust isn't built by saying, okay, like I have no idea what I'm talking about. It's saying, hey, these are the concepts that I've learned about. Can you explain more? And if it gets to a point where it gets too technical, that's where you can be like, all right, thank you for explaining this. I hear that you have XYZ pain point. My customer already had this pain point. I have someone else on my team that would love to talk about this more with you. And we've not necessarily crossed this bridge yet. But the narrative would be, at this point, you still don't sell because the person may not at any point be interested in buying. The person you're engaging with may just be there for the knowledge sharing. But that's where you can kind of bring it to the next topic that I think we wanted to get into, which is kind of content creation. And then this is where it all fits together. But you have these folks that you've been communicating with, you get them just in a chat first, then maybe you get them to join you for a phone call. Hey, let's chat a little bit more. Let's engage more on this topic. I'd love to learn more. And then at the next stage, if it's going positively and interactions are going well, you have the opportunity to create content together. Hey, let's hop on a quick call, do either a podcast, do a video recording. We'll create blog, social post, newsletter, what have you, whatever content framework you're building, you're able to repurpose that with the benefit going to the prospect or your target audience saying, hey, like you have the opportunity to have your voice heard. Because sometimes folks have a lot they want to say that they can't necessarily say internally. Not that it's anything bad, but they want to talk about these things with their peers. So you have these conversations and you end up having them in a much more public fashion in a content format. And you end up having a growing range of messages as time progresses. And I think you can continue to expand on that, but you're right. The limitation does come back to, hey, how long can you take this from the knowledge sharing before they're like, all right, I don't want to be your mentor. Like, that's not what I signed up for.
Yeah.
That's where you kind of bring in the folks who do have some more expertise to talk with them. If it ends up being something that's more As a sales opportunity, you need to communicate that with your team. Perfect world, you have the opportunity to communicate that with the person you're speaking with and say, hey, listen, I think we can help you out here. I've heard your pain points, and I think that something we can do can help you out. So I think it's all of it has to be more or less conversation.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And you're right that I think once you have that baseline, or let's say your positioning straight and you feel confident about it, then yeah, you have to communicate that to the world, right? Where that's explicitly, implicitly, selling it hard, or just with asking the right questions in a discovery call. But you definitely need to put it out there one way or another, right? So what is your point of view on, okay, we talked about ABM done right being, in essence, getting your positioning right, and your baseline. What is content generation not done right? Because I think obviously the quality and quantity comes into play when you talk about done right, but let's say done smartly, to your point of the challenge of having usually a tight budget to work with, right? So what's a smart way to create and distribute content?
This is kind of a silly one because inherently the answer is a bit dated and the actual output does not necessarily convert into business objectives. And the first statement is just get started. And the second statement is I've always had my team, and this is because I started this way. I always have my team start by just writing blogs. Create a cadence of writing blogs consistently that you can publish, let's say, once per month, then twice per month, then once per week, then twice per week. Get that cadence out there so then you have this area of measurability and predictability. And in the process of creation, you're learning about what actually matters to that market. You're becoming an expert in that subject. But the reason that I'm taking that back now and saying it doesn't necessarily work for business objectives is that people don't really read blogs anymore. Not as often, especially, I would say even less so with conversational AI, with ChatGPT, with Microsoft Copilot, Gemini, what have you. You just punch in your question, it summarizes the blog. I know on my phone, I have a Samsung, the new Samsung. They came out with their Samsung AI. If you use their internet browser, there's a little button on it you can push, and it just says summarize article. It summarizes the entire post into 3 or 4 bullet points. So blogs aren't the best way forward from a pure tangible business perspective, but they give you that cadence, they give you that knowledge. So to your question, what should you do? Why should you do it? Get started. And if get started with a medium that you and your team is most comfortable with creating, because you just need cadence. I think the most modern way to do it, the way that perhaps my team and I have not yet adopted to, is the video first format. Anything you create with video can be repurposed into so many different formats, and so easily. You have immediately published the video on your own page. You have YouTube. You can repurpose it as a podcast, be launched on audio only platforms, cut up into snippets to be put on TikTok, IG, and I guess apparently sometime soon LinkedIn is going to have a scrolling video type format. I saw some mullings about that they're launching a beta test for it in Canada. So video first, and then and what you can further extract from that is the text to create blogs, social media posts, what have you. You have the target audience. You have your methodology for what their pain points are, what the trends are, what you should be communicating about. So just start. I think it's very challenging. Taking that first leap of just starting is just get going, build a cadence, much like you might in your personal life. Make it not necessarily a hobby of it because it's your job, but make it something that's almost automatic. I would say.
Yeah. No, it's great points. And then so let's say, okay, you started crawling, right? And you're all now almost walking, right? But what would be then the equivalent of going from walking to running? So it's a company that, let's say, have a couple writers, whether that's on payroll or freelance. They have an SEO person giving them intelligence on what to write about. They have a content calendar. They have a videographer on site creating videos once per quarter, so it's somewhat mature, right? The content generation practice somewhat mature. Then what, right? Like, what are some either common mistakes or advice for companies at that stage?
I'm not even at that. My company's not even at that stage yet, but I can already tell you it's something that we need to be doing and something that we're working towards. It's optimization and scale. You're creating all of these things. You have to be looking at the data. What's converting well, what's not. You get the insight that I just gave that blogs don't work. That's data that we know from our current processes. So we have to learn to shift. We have to adjust the methodology and find different use cases. If you have a full media house like that, you have to already have some learnings and understand what can be adjusted to better improve your conversion rates, better improve your scale. There's always ways to do better. And in many cases, it could be efficiency. Maybe it could be you've gotten to the point where you are working with some sort of conversational AI. You've trained it on all of the topics you want to address for the next 12 months. And you've trained it to an extent that the tone of voice comes out okay enough. At that point, you'll find you may not need the 3 or 4 copywriters generating all that much blog posts. At that point, you might say, all right, now's the time for me to optimize, bring it down to 2 copywriters, convert that into social media marketers who can actually distribute that because they have this base layer framework of content that they can just create and they read through, make sound human. You get the videographer to come in more often to create more content. It's just like in media buying, it's just about flipping the switches to see what works, looking at the data and making sure that you're just not stagnating and doing the same things consistently time and time again.
In terms of measuring, one thing that I see a lot is that maybe you have Google Analytics on your site and you are aware of the traffic that each blog post or case study or whatever content piece you generated is bringing, but you have no clue if those potential customers, how ready to buy are they, right? Maybe it's a top of the funnel piece that generate a lot of educational interest, but none of them ended up scaling a consultation or eventually becoming a client. Whereas another one, it only got 20 clicks, 13 visits, but you closed 2 clients because it was such at such a stage in the funnel, right? So if you don't have Google Analytics tied to your CRM, and you don't have a couple of ways in which you are gathering keywords, because and the search console to Google Analytics to your CRM, if you don't have that integrated, it's tough to do. And another one is, and I want to get into that, is the balance between what's traditionally called organic, that a lot of times, and I say traditional because a lot of times people think it implies free, but it's not free because the videographer costs you $500 because your team spent 40 hours. So that's another, I don't know, $2,000, $4,000, depending on the seniority of your team and where they are. You brought in your subject matter experts, for a few hours also to do the videos. Then you had to edit the video and put it out. A lot of times that ends up being, okay, a 45-second video on LinkedIn that got 30 likes out of 25 were within your company, and that's the death of all of that effort, right? So you spend, I don't know, $10,000 for 4 likes on potential customers, right? That's not a great ROI. So how do you strike that balance between organic and paid, and any advice there?
Attribution is the death of the marketer. We all love it. We all crave it, but it is the most necessary and worst thing to happen in marketing, because we are looking at every nitty-gritty detail to the point where to try to optimize what's working well and what's not working well. And unfortunately, that's just the nature of the business. We're built in a digital first world. You have to understand the impact of the efforts that are going into it. I don't think that Google Analytics and your CRM are enough anymore. There are certain touch points there that might connect the dots, but it's not going to tell you the journey. And there's a few really, really great creators out there. So the first one that comes to mind is this guy named Andrei Zinkovich from Full Funnel IO. And also, I believe Chris Walker talks about it often as well. The customer journey is non-linear. We used to think it was person sees top of the funnel post A, they'll then go view middle of the funnel post, bottom of the funnel post, they'll convert. That's not the reality of it. The attribution is so much more than did they view a blog post and then convert. You have to tie so many things. I think GA4 is doing some good stuff with attribution, especially in the future of a cookieless world. But there's still the challenge of it's so much more than, hey, this person visited your website. What about the touch points that happened on LinkedIn? The communications that happen on events. If you have some sort of community, a Slack community, all of these things impact someone's potential interest or not. There are, of course, metrics and points you can assign by intent. So we're talking about stages of the funnel with your content. You say, hey, blog post, that's top of the funnel. As an example, you can have a deeper dive on the specific subject that gets super technical, that's middle of the funnel. And then you have an assessment, a straight up assessment of your processes. That's probably bottom of the funnel. This person's looking for a solution to their problem. But how they got to each stage is non-linear. And it's not completely enough just to look at Google Analytics and your CRM. And if that's all you have, then you have to be very, very mindful with the type of content you're creating and the cadence with which you're publishing, so you can see the journey that's taken between each stage. So if you have only top of the funnel content, it's unlikely to convert, and it's kind of like, oh, why did this work? Or only bottom of the funnel, how do they get to you? But if you're creating a balanced approach and you're distributing it according to a certain campaign framework, then okay, they entered when this post was published, which then talked about this, which we then talked about on social media, then they engaged on Slack. And anyway, I'm not going to break that down in depth, but essentially connecting all the pieces. And this is something that we're working on now. We've had an incredible limitation with our attribution because we have Google and then we have a CRM called Zoho. So we have to do some tweaking to fix that up. But it's a challenge and we have to figure it out. But then to your question about balancing organic and paid, it's muddy now, isn't it? Because most organic things, if you see that they're working well, you got to put some budget behind it. But where the challenge arises today is you budget. Do you have enough to actually put into your paid efforts? The one paid method that I will never support, and I love kind of talking bad about it, is some of these industry reports. I won't name names, but some of these major analysts who put these reports, they charge an arm and a leg to download this industry report. And they kind of have the name value to be able to support it. But from my side and from Innovecs side, I see that as an opportunity. Let's run a report of our own. Let's work with the folks who would like to read it to capture their insights. We'll put the report, we'll publish it for free. Boom, we've captured our prospect. We've captured more prospect data. But yeah, right now I think organic is what a lot of marketing teams have to figure out, because paid, the budget is incredibly limited, especially in B2B services sectors. SaaS, they may have investment as a startup, what have you, or if it's larger scale and shareholder owned already, you might have the budget. But it's really important to find the balance. I think organic is the opportunity to test the market. If you don't have brand awareness online, focus on building it. It's easier said than done. We've been building our brand for nearly a year now for Innovecs Supply Chain. I think we're very close to hitting 1,000 followers on that page. So fingers crossed on that one. But let's assume that you have a nice brand, you have nice brand awareness, but you're missing the paid elements. It's just getting the communication out, build those touch points out, work with the community that you have the opportunity to build with.
Yeah, and about the attribution, I agree, and I come from an analytics background in terms of managing a web analytics team, and from that perspective, I could be the number one person pointing to advanced attribution and multi-touch journeys with AI and everything, and I simply don't believe in it. I take it back to a much more simple and basic approach. We do what we do a detective work when, either for us or for one of our clients, generates not an MQL, not perhaps even an SQL, but definitely when it reaches the opportunity stage, then we take the time and effort to say, okay, let's manually look at the CRM, the emails that this person has opened, this person or account has opened, where are they visiting? Let's look at Google Analytics, where are they visiting, what keywords they used. We usually recommend, conversion form, the good old, how did you hear about us? That gives you a lot of insight. Then, sales folks are in the initial conversation, hey, how did you hear about us, right? And a combination of those factors will allow you to say, okay, and let's do fractional, right? Let's do manual fractional attribution. Let's say, okay, let's assign 25%, to this content piece that sounds like it was important for them. Marketing automation, three different folks open several emails, and then, one of them called their attention. So let's give marketing automation some credit. Paid, yeah, they clicked a couple of remarketing ads. I guess that had something to do, but let's just give them 10%, right? So doing that manual fractional attribution, in my opinion, that's way more practical and has a bigger impact on your optimizations than any other advanced attribution model that they're trying to sell you out there. I don't know if that's something that, sounds like you're.
It's one of those things I wish. It's one of those things like I wish, but the experience I have is that we're being asked, hey, why does this thing work? What should we be doing more of and why? And a statement that's just made without data is like, okay, prove it. Oh man, I can't. I can't because I don't have the data to support this. And we're in a position where we have a very limited data set. So the attribution that comes, so this is kind of like that mix, and we need to find as marketers that middle area between how much is too much attribution and how much is not enough. Because at that level of just self-reported attribution, they're not going to remember everything. They're not going to remember all the touch points that happened across their journey. They're going to remember a few key ones. They're going to remember, oh yeah, like I read this blog post. Maybe I watched this webinar, I listened to your podcast, something like this. But there was some crazy statistic that I read no more than 3 months ago. My PMM sent it to me, so I can't cite the report off the top of my head. But in this report, it suggested that the average or the median touch points, amount of touch points you need to have with your prospective buyer is now 50 to 70. So, and touch points is including ads, social media posts, everything. So naturally, if you're getting 50 to 70 touch points with this different person, they're only going to remember 2 or 3. So that's why that data becomes important. Like, okay, what kind of took them on the journey? Maybe you don't need to understand those 50 to 70. Maybe you need 10 key ones, like I don't know what the term I'm looking for. 10 key touch points are like, okay, check. They hit this, check. And that can inform what you're working on. Because no one's gonna remember an ad. Heck, I get YouTube ads. It's like, oh, which one of these brands did you see an ad for? Yes. I'm like, what? I don't remember.
Or you can just pound them with remarketing, a frequency of 20 per day, 4 days. You're gonna close them as a customer on day 4.
Yeah. Every marketer's dream, no?
Right. Josh, anything else that we haven't got to talk about that you think would be helpful for our audience to hear from you?
I think a bit. So we talked a little bit, at least right before the call started, about how all this things fits together in a referral first business model. Mm-hmm. So in services sector, I imagine you have a similar experience as an agency as well. You'll find that, I don't know, maybe you've cracked the code, but from everyone I've spoken to, they say, yeah, somewhere between 70 to 80% of their business comes from referrals. So from either existing customers or friends of friends this way. So as a marketer, how do you crack that code? How do you get into the mind of a prospect when everything is built on trust? So I think, to me, and I figured this is a good one to bring up because this is where it all ties together, where you have the ABM methodology, the content communications, the distribution channels. You have to work together in alignment to build the trust by communicating with these individuals, not through any tool sets, not through AI, perhaps at an event or two when you meet with them in person, but get conversational, really learn who these people are. They'll learn who you are. And then marketing becomes the referral. Marketing using ABM tactics to create content, using ABM baseline methodology to understand who their target audience is, what are their pain points, putting it all together. that's how marketing becomes a referral business without actually being attributed as a referral.
So it's about having genuine conversations with your prospects, finding a way to do that. Is that the takeaway?
Yeah.
Did I read that takeaway correctly?
Yeah. Get in touch with your prospects, even if they're not your prospects and they won't ever actually be, I mean, person to person, but at least within the target audience, talk to them. People are more willing to talk to a real person nowadays than one is willing to hear, especially if there's no sales pitch tied to it.
Another, refreshing and back to basics advice, going to the initial part of the conversation where you say, just show some vulnerability and simply look to have those conversations, right? It's not, the answer is not in some futuristic AI tool that will be magical. It's a lot of times back to basics, in a lot of ways.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, great, Josh. I enjoyed our conversation a lot. I think, again, even though it's a topic that I'm fairly familiar with because it's what we do, it's still, I wouldn't say, again, we crack the code neither in ABM or in non-referral marketing at all. So obviously, myself, I'm sure our audience is going to learn a lot, but it was particularly refreshing to hear from somebody that has so much experience in this area, that has knowledge and access to all of these different technologies and tools. It's refreshing and really insightful to know that a lot of times, the key is not there, but it's in, more of a basic essence of human nature and psychology, and simply connection and vulnerability. So, very refreshing to hear.
Yeah. Thanks, Carlos. It's always, even if we don't find the immediate answer today, tomorrow, I find that it's always fun to have these types of conversations, because then, how else do we ideate?
Yeah, no, for sure. So appreciate you being on the podcast, Josh. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Tailwind Marketing Podcast. If you enjoyed it, remember to subscribe for future episodes. Until next time.